Fabian. I'm from Germany, and I'm only waiting for the slides to show up. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about how we use smart contracts to develop something that we call a decentralized company, or even a decentralized autonomous company. Well, a definition of smart contracts, you probably know all of that stuff. It's something that formalized agreements between parties evaluated by some blockchain or some mechanism, no intermediaries, trackable and transparent, all these buzzwords you probably know. And we can use these contracts to build something that I would call a decentralized autonomous system. Decentralized, it means there's no central authority, no single point of failure. Autonomous means it does its thing on its own. You don't need human intervention to say, okay, this is not okay. The purpose of that system works on its own. And then, well, there's a system. That means that entire blockchain or whatever it's built on serves some purpose or has some tasks. So this is a very general definition of what I call like decentralized autonomous system. But we're interested in making a company. So what we are going to replace is the system and make it a company and change the purpose. It's not a specific purpose anymore, it's a commercial purpose. So what that means is we have a commercial background. And the interesting thing here now is that two worlds basically clash together. We have the brick and mortar companies that have CEOs, headquarters and stuff, and we potentially have companies that are solely written in software that run on their own, fully automated, fully autonomous, and fully decentralized. So the ingredients, this is pretty much just other words for blockchain. We have state, we have communications between participants, peer-to-peer network. We have a consensus layer and logic, some business logic, and the resulting properties are, well, something reliable because of a blockchain. We have this autonomous behavior, it's automated, it's all of the things we know from blockchain. Companies, we just add some more ingredients. So we have services that the blockchain offers to people, products, pretty much the same thing as services. Think of digital services. Easiest example would be Uber kind of thing, or a marketplace like Amazon. It's a digital, purely digital thing. We add fees and some sort of governance, because over time things change. A business needs to adapt over time. And the outcome would be that we have a flexible company that has revenue, that has expenses, and depending on revenue and expenses, of course we know all of that, we potentially have profits. And of course, the company has shareholders. Technically, I wouldn't call any of that a company, because a company is a brick and mortar thing, comes with legal implications, and I wouldn't also call it shareholders, because shareholders come with legal implications. I'm still going to stick with that because it's easy to understand. And I don't want to come up with new names. So just a baseline, Bitcoin. Let's think about Bitcoin as a company. Many of you will probably know that doesn't work out. Bitcoin has a monetary policy. Companies don't have monetary policies, right? There's some maximum supply, there's some mining that earns a fee, there's some inflation, there's minting, and there's a transaction fee actually even, so it could be a company, but it's not. And the expenses are used for paying the miners additionally. So Bitcoin is not really a DAC. If it was a DAC, it would be a lousy investment for the shareholders, because you get nothing for buying a Bitcoin other than capital appreciation, which is not what investors are necessarily looking for. They look for dividends, and you don't get them. So it's not a company, it's more a currency, commodity. I'm not going to go into that discussion. There was an attempt, or there is an attempt, to building a DAC. It's following the concept quite well. It's called BitShares, it's the sponsor here. There's a core token that has these units. There's no dilution technically, so you're not diluted away for holding your tokens. And then the company, the blockchain, actually has something like a reserve pool, like a capital stock that regular companies have as well. And the transaction fees that people pay, depending on what they do, go right into the reserves. And then there's expenses for block producers, paying development, all these kind of things that go out of the reserves. So now you have this kind of thing that the reserves grow and shrink depending on income and expenses of the blockchain itself. So the entire reserves are held by the blockchain and controlled by the shareholders, those that can vote with their BTS tokens. There's one issue still, and that is not strictly a company, because it still has its profits mainly from speculation or speculative appreciation. Why is that? Because if you think about supply and dilution, you basically have a fixed supply, a total supply that's fixed, that's not changing, and you have some supply that's in the company. And that supply in the company changes. And just the liquid supply and the company supply are the total supply. So what happens is that the expectation was that the liquid tokens are going to raise in the unit value if the reserves grow in valuation. But that doesn't always work out because either people don't know it or the markets are inefficient or for whatever reason. So companies usually pay dividends to people if the reserves grow too much or they make too much profits. They just pay dividends and the number of tokens I have in my account, number of euros, grows. And that's not what's happening over here. And that's probably the biggest flaw that BitShares has if you wanted to think of a DAC. So I personally don't think it's strictly speaking a company, but it's a good direction, and I think it's doing quite well because it's funding, I don't know how much money it's funding, a lot. So right now the expenses on BitShares are primarily block production and worker or budgets. That's basically anything people can think of. You just say, I want a certain budget over time, and if the shareholders, the people that have BTS, can vote on it and say, okay, you get the money over time. And they're spending 40K a year on infrastructure, servers, hosting, 1.4 million this year on core development, like the actual blockchain development. There's another 500,000 in UI development. There's people building bots and people looking into legal and compliance. There's even something sponsoring a conference. The number here was from last year. This year is much higher. There's Hack the DAX, that's basically funding people to hack. And, well, spokesperson, that's something more like legal. Income, basically 20% of every fee that is paid on the blockchain goes into the reserves. There's some numbers, think of them as arbitrary numbers. They don't have a meaning unless you give BTS a price, which means that the actual income in US dollar valuation depends on the BTS price in US dollar, and there's speculation on this. So these numbers kind of make no sense if you want them in US dollars or euro because you have the volatility of usual cryptocurrencies. And then there's also trading fees because BitShares has a feature, a DEX, an exchange where you can trade on the blockchain, and there's a range of fees that basically apply on trading and all the different operations. As I mentioned, profits are not actually distributed, they are collected in the company and the reserves grow, and the expectation was that if the reserves grow, the share price goes up. It's an experiment. So far, it's not easy to figure it out because it's still in the startup phase and paying more than it makes as a revenue. So, after all, I think BitShares has a corporate monetary policy, more like dealing with the reserves, dealing with the expenses, dealing with the income. So this is a real tough governance problem for the BitShares community. They have to figure out how to deal with economics, and they are a lot of nerds. Doesn't always work out too well. But the direction is good, very good actually. So governance, just quickly, governance in our case is we go from chaos to order, and we have to apply complexity to get there. That means a lot of talking, a lot of chatting, and then there's something on the chain we call proposals that says, I want to do this, I'm asking for everyone to approve. So we can actually do governance on the BitShares blockchain quite easily, get an approval from the shareholders that they support this idea, and then after you get the approval, you just go ahead and even get funding for it if you want. And everything is tracked on the public ledger. So you see the proposals as they come in, you see who's approving it, and take your, make your consequences and conclusions, draw your conclusions. As an outlook, well, as I mentioned, BitShares isn't really a DAC per se, so I would like to think of something that actually implements a company on the blockchain. To do that, we have to strictly separate expenses and revenue and have to think about them, like what are they? Like apply economics 101 on the blockchain. We also have to separate inflation and dilution from reserves and profits. Dilution doesn't really exist on BitShares, but it could. They could start minting new BTS and dilute every BTS holder next to all the profits. Whether that makes sense or not is not my decision. It's up to the BitShares community, but that's technically possible, and it should be regarded separately. We also have to separate governance from all the individual aspects, like there's business discussions, there's technical discussions, there's legal discussions. All of these are require people to have quite some knowledge, and these are usually different people. And then somehow the stakeholders or shareholders need to be rewarded, and not by speculative appreciation. So the open questions are still this reward sharing token. This has like a characteristics of a security token. How do you deal with that? Do you allow people to mine it, earn it, whatever? Should reward tokens be transferable even? Like you can earn your membership ticket, but you cannot sell it. But once you are a member, you earn from the profits of the company. That's all possible. Of course, governance and profits should be separated, like what MakerDAO did. They have the MKR coin and the Ethereum token. That's essentially two different things serving two specific purposes. There's no intermingling like it's happening on BitShares currently. And well, essentially we would like to have an autonomous company that more closely resembles what we know from regular companies. Think of Class A shares and Class B shares, where one can vote in governance and the other just receives the profits. Good. Questions? I have a few. You can think about them.
A native blockchain that implements the system that you described versus a set of smart contracts that implements a similar system.
To me, that question is difficult to answer because smart contracts are the means to achieve that. So there will be smart contracts. Whether you implement this on top of an existing blockchain or you start a new one, I don't have the answer to that. I do see advantages of not relying on another blockchain because essentially you're doing governance. Governance also means that you want to have control over the block producers. And if I run this on top of Ethereum, I don't have that control over block producers. And I also don't have, what's even worse, I don't have control over the transaction fees. So does that mean I would go to EOS to run this? Probably no, because it's another story there. You don't have transaction fees there, but if you deploy smart contracts that are asking for a fee, someone else would just copy the smart contract, remove the fee, and then your business dies. So to answer your question, after thinking about this, I would actually think it requires a new blockchain. And
I agree. There are actually organization types and types of even like smart contracts, things that are being built as smart contracts that would be much better suited to have their own natural blockchain.
Yeah. There's another thing. The question is, what purpose does your company serve? Do you want to be a company that's like BitShares providing a distributed decentralized exchange? Then all you have to provide is something that allows you to place an order, cancel an order, and something that automatically fills the orders and transfers. That's 4 operations, 4 things that the blockchain needs to do. I don't need the entire shebang of smart contracting for that, because it also introduces a lot of security, implementation, all the drama that comes with smart contracts as well. So I would even argue to have it fixed, integrated as a set of tools that you can use. And when you think your company has made profits from that and you want to explore other areas, then you just say, okay, let's add other features. That's how I would do it. Everyone's open to think of its own, like, this is the company I would like to run. There's a lot of challenges that I didn't even mention here, like funding that thing and being compliant. But there's a lot of opportunities of building a company as an autonomous company on a blockchain.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.